The mountain town of Pine Valley had always prided itself on being a sanctuary. Nestled between towering evergreens and crystal lakes, it was the kind of place where people moved to escape the chaos of city life. Children walked to school without fear, neighbors left their doors unlocked, and the biggest crime was usually someone forgetting to pay their parking meter. That illusion crumbled on a Tuesday afternoon when a black sedan pulled up beside 8-year-old Maya Chen as she walked home from violin practice. From his workshop behind the house, Marcus Chen looked like any other small-town mechanic. Grease-stained coveralls, calloused hands, and a quiet demeanor that made him blend into the background of Pine Valley's tight-knit community. What the men in the sedan didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just a mechanic. He was former Delta Force, with 3 tours in Afghanistan and skills that had been honed in the world's most dangerous places. They thought they had chosen an easy target. They couldn't have been more wrong. The afternoon unfiltered through the workshop's dusty windows as Marcus tightened the last bolt on Mrs. Patterson's transmission. The familiar scent of motor oil and the steady rhythm of his work usually brought him peace, but today something felt off. His daughter was 10 minutes late from her music lesson, and Maya was never late. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We have your daughter. $50,000. No police or she disappears forever." Marcus's hand stilled on his wrench. Every instinct from his military training kicked in instantly. He scanned the workshop, noting exits, potential weapons, and cover positions. But beneath the tactical assessment, his heart hammered with a father's terror. Another text arrived, this one with a photo. Maya sat in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, her violin case beside her, tears streaming down her face. But she was alive, and that's all that mattered. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. The Delta Force training came flooding back. Stay calm, gather intelligence, plan methodically. He had advantages the kidnappers didn't know about. They saw a small-town mechanic. He was a weapon. The third text came with instructions. Bring the money to the old lumber mill on Route 19 at midnight. Come alone. Marcus knew the place. It had been shuttered for 5 years, its skeletal frame perfect for an ambush. But it also had multiple entry points, sightlines he could exploit, and terrain he'd scouted during his morning runs. The kidnappers had chosen his battlefield. He spent the next few hours preparing. From a hidden safe behind his tool cabinet, he retrieved equipment most mechanics didn't keep: night vision goggles, tactical gear, and a combat knife that had saved his life more than once overseas. He studied satellite images of the mill on his phone, memorizing every building, every approach route. At 11:30 p.m., Marcus parked his truck 2 miles from the mill and approached on foot. The mountain air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of running water. Moving through the forest felt natural, like slipping back into his old skin. Through the night vision scope, he identified 3 men stationed around the main building. Amateur positioning, they were focused on the obvious approach routes, leaving blind spots that Delta Force training had taught him to exploit. The first sentry never saw him coming. A sleeper hold, applied with surgical precision, dropped the man silently. Marcus dragged him behind a pile of rotting lumber and secured him with zip ties. The second guard was smoking a cigarette near the loading dock, the orange glow destroying his night vision. Marcus approached from the shadows, using a piece of rebar to render him unconscious with a precise strike to the pressure point behind his ear. Inside the main building, he could hear voices. Maya's frightened whimper made his jaw clench, but he forced himself to remain methodical. Through a broken window, he assessed the situation: 2 more men, both armed, with Maya tied to a chair in the center of the room. "Where is he?" one of the kidnappers growled. "It's past midnight." "Maybe he's not coming," the other replied. "Maybe he doesn't care about the kid." Maya's voice, small but defiant, cut through the darkness. "My daddy always comes for me." Marcus smiled grimly. She was right. He entered through a skylight, rappelling down on a rope made from electrical cable he'd found outside. The first kidnapper went down hard, Marcus's boot connecting with his temple before the man could raise his weapon. The second spun around, gun drawn, But Marcus was already moving, using Maya's chair as cover while he closed the distance. The fight was brief and brutal. Years of hand-to-hand combat training against a panicked criminal was no contest. Within 30 seconds, both men were unconscious on the concrete floor. "Daddy." Maya's voice was thick with tears and relief. Marcus quickly cut her restraints, gathering her into his arms. "I've got you, sweetheart. I've got you." As sirens approached in the distance, he'd called Sheriff Williams on his way in. Marcus held his daughter close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. The terror of the last few hours began to fade, replaced by overwhelming relief. "How did you find me so fast?" Maya asked, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. Marcus kissed the top of her head. "I'll always find you, Maya. Always." The investigation that followed revealed the kidnapping was more than random crime. The three men were part of a human trafficking ring that had been using Pine Valley's isolation to move children through the mountains to buyers in larger cities. Maya had been their first local target, chosen because she seemed to have a single parent with no family support system. They had researched Marcus's background, but only the surface level. Divorced mechanic, recently moved to Pine Valley, kept to himself. They saw vulnerability where they should have seen danger. Sheriff Williams, a 20-year veteran who had served 2 tours in Iraq himself, recognized the signs immediately. "Military?" he asked Marcus as they watched the FBI load the suspects into transport vehicles. Marcus nodded. "Delta Force. 3 tours. I figured. Civilians don't move like that." Williams shook his head. "Lucky for Maya. Unlucky for them." In the weeks that followed, Pine Valley rallied around the Chen family in a way that surprised Marcus. Neighbors brought casseroles and offered to walk Maya to and from school. Mrs. Patterson organized a self-defense class at the community center, asking Marcus to teach basic safety awareness to local parents. "You don't understand," Marcus protested. "I'm not a teacher. I'm just a mechanic." "No," replied Mrs. Patterson firmly. "You're the man who brought our children home safe. You're exactly what this community needs." The first class drew 30 parents. Marcus taught them situational awareness, basic escape techniques, and how to create communication networks to keep their children safe. By the 3rd week, the class had grown to 50 participants. Maya, who had been quiet and withdrawn immediately after the kidnapping, slowly began to smile again. She started carrying herself differently too, with a confidence that came from knowing her father would move heaven and earth to protect her. "Daddy," she said one evening as he tucked her into bed, "are you going to teach me that stuff too?" "What stuff?" "How to be strong like you. How to protect people." Marcus considered this carefully. "Being strong isn't about fighting, sweetheart. It's about knowing what's worth protecting and never giving up on it." Maya nodded solemnly. "Like family. Exactly like family." 6 months later, Pine Valley had transformed. The community center buzzed with activity, self-defense classes, neighborhood watch training, and emergency response drills. Children still played in the streets, but parents kept better watch. Neighbors knew each other's schedules and checked in regularly. Marcus's garage had become an unofficial community hub. People brought their cars for repairs, but they also brought their concerns, their fears, and their questions about safety. He listened with the patience of someone who understood that peace required vigilance. The trafficking ring's network had been dismantled, with arrests made in 3 states. The FBI credited the Pine Valley operation with breaking open a case they'd been working for 2 years. Maya's rescue had saved countless other children. On a crisp autumn morning, as Marcus walked Maya to school, she slipped her hand into his. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. You were braver than any soldier I've ever known." Maya grinned up at him. "That's because I learned from the best." Behind them, Pine Valley continued its morning routine. But now it was different, stronger, more connected, more aware. The community had learned that safety didn't come from isolation or wishful thinking. It came from neighbors who watched out for each other, parents who stayed alert, and the quiet strength of those willing to stand up when it mattered most. Marcus had found something in Pine Valley he hadn't expected, not just a place to hide from his past, but a community worth protecting. And Maya had learned that sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms or badges, sometimes they wear coveralls and work with their hands, but their hearts are strong enough to move mountains. The shadow that had fallen over Pine Valley had lifted, replaced by the warm light of a community that refused to live in fear. And in his workshop, as Marcus returned to the familiar rhythm of his work, he smiled. He was no longer just a man running from his past. He was a father, a neighbor, and a guardian of the peace they had all helped to build.